The twin suns of Valeria Prime hung low above the crystalline spires, casting amber and violet light across the diplomatic chamber, where human destinies were traded like cargo. Marcus Chen stood bound in iron restraints, his breath fogging in the recycled air as he watched alien dignitaries debate his future with the same disinterest one might show when choosing fruit at a market. Before him stood Sarah Thalen of the Valorians, motionless in her bioluminescent ceremonial armor. Her azure skin shimmered under the chamber's shifting lights, her expression unreadable behind eyes that had witnessed decades more than Marcus's entire life. The Valorian council chamber stretched higher than seemed possible. Its walls formed from living crystal that pulsed, faintly alive with the energy of 1,000 interstellar treaties. Marcus had been standing for nearly 3 hours, his wrists raw beneath the ornate restraints that marked him as collateral, a diplomatic euphemism for what he truly was, a hostage. Around him, representatives from a dozen species argued over Earth's continued access to the Nexus Gateway, the only passage through which supply ships could reach the dying colonies on the rim. From the observation deck above, Marcus caught sight of his mother's face, frozen between maternal pain and fragile hope. Their colony on Kepler 442b was failing. The atmosphere was collapsing. Without the gateway, they had maybe 6 months of oxygen left, 7 if they began rationing children's air first. The human offers insufficient value, said Ambassador Zexthor, his chitinous mandibles clacking with disdain. Their technology is primitive, their cultural influence insignificant. Marcus stood silent as his fate was argued in a language his translator chip struggled to fully interpret. Humiliation burned in his chest, but he forced himself to remain expressionless. Any display of emotion would only weaken Earth's position. Then a voice, clear, measured, and unexpectedly human in tone, cut through the chamber like a blade through silk. I propose an alternative arrangement. It was Sarah Thalen. Until now, she had remained still among the Valorian delegation, her stillness almost statuesque. As she stepped forward, the bioluminescent lines across her skin shifted from cool blue to a faint golden hue. She stood nearly 7 feet tall in her ceremonial armor, an elegant, almost regal figure, her features at once alien and hauntingly beautiful. High cheekbones caught the light as her gaze locked onto Marcus. Her eyes, pupils narrowing vertically like a predator's, locked onto Marcus. Strands of auburn hair laced with silver that marked both her age and rank were woven into intricate braids that shimmered faintly under the crystalline lights. "The Valorians will sponsor Earth's passage through the gate," she declared, in exchange for a formal matrimonial bond. The word sent a visible ripple through the chamber. Conversations halted. Heads turned. "You would bind yourself to this child?" Ambassador Zexthor's disbelief vibrated through the air. His mandibles clicked sharply as he continued. "Sarah Thalen, you are of the first generation. Your lineage traces back to the founding voyages. This human hasn't even completed 3 decades of life." Sarah Thalen's gaze never wavered. "I am aware of our difference in years," she replied calmly. The chamber erupted, voices in a dozen languages, overlapping in disbelief and outrage. Marcus felt his stomach twist. Marriage. They were discussing his marriage like a trade agreement, a political merger between 2 desperate powers. "The human must consent," came a low voice from the judicial sector. Every eye turned to Marcus. He looked up toward the observation deck, where his mother pressed her trembling hands against the glass. Behind her stood the rest of the human delegation, faces pale with fear, hope, and exhaustion. These were people whose children were suffocating on a dying world. He thought of his little sister, 12 years old, coughing blood for weeks now, their colony's air thinned to poison. "I consent." The words escaped before his mind caught up to his mouth. The guards released his restraints. The cold metal fell away. Marcus's eyes followed Sarah Thalen as she turned and strode from the chamber, her movements smooth and predatory. She didn't look back once. She had bought his life with her own freedom. But in the upper gallery, several of her kin watched silently. Their expressions weren't approval. It was something darker, anticipation, like predators waiting for a signal. The preparation chambers beneath, the Hall of Convergence, were unlike anything Marcus had seen. The walls seemed alive, shifting through subtle hues that shimmered and pulsed with an emotion he could almost feel. These patterns, explained his Valorian instructor, reflect emotional resonance. The chamber reacts to consciousness. His assigned liaison, Calvin, was considered young among the Valorians, barely 60 cycles old. Iridescent emerald markings flowed across his skin as he spoke. You must understand, Calvin said. The naming ceremony is not symbolic. When Sarah Thalen speaks your name in the old tongue, she will encode a fragment of her consciousness within it. You will carry a piece of herself inside you. Marcus tugged uneasily at the ceremonial robe draped over his shoulders. That sounds invasive. It is not invasive, Calvin corrected gently. It is intimate. You will become attuned to each other, her emotions, her pain, her thoughts, and she will feel yours. Marcus frowned. But she's doing this for political reasons. What's the point of such a bond if it's not real? Calvin's markings darkened, a ripple of discomfort passing across his features. Did she tell you why she needs to prove herself? Marcus shook his head. Sarah Thalen lost her previous bond partner 40 cycles ago, Calvin said quietly. Both of their children were killed in the Korath uprising. She spent 2 decades mourning them. His voice trailed off, leaving a silence that seemed to hum through the living walls. This bond with you is not political theater, Marcus Chen, Calvin said softly. For her, it's something far deeper. It's her final attempt to give meaning to a life scarred by loss. Marcus felt something shift inside him. The woman who had stood before the council like a calculated strategist now appeared in a different light, not a cold diplomat, but someone carrying the unbearable weight of grief. A low harmonic vibration filled the chamber, the signal that the solar alignment was beginning. The Hall of Convergence was vast, yet the ceremony itself unfolded within a small, intimate circle at its center. As Marcus stepped into the light, he saw Sarah Thalen waiting there. She was radiant, adorned in ritual attire that revealed much of her azure skin, allowing the bioluminescent markings across her body to glow at full strength. They shimmered and flowed like liquid constellations. Her hair was unbound now, cascading down her back in a mesmerizing wave of auburn and silver. The only ornament she wore was a single crystal pendant, glimmering faintly, containing the molecular essence of her late bond partner and children. When their eyes met, Marcus caught something unexpected in her expression: uncertainty. The council arbiter lifted their crystalline appendages, and the chamber fell into reverent silence. We gather at the convergence of 3 moons and 2 suns, the arbiter declared, to witness the binding of souls across the void between worlds. Sarah Thalen of House Valerian, first generation of the founding voyages. You have claimed bond right with this human. State your intention. Sarah Thalen stepped forward. The luminous patterns on her skin flared brighter, golden threads rippling across her body. I claim Marcus Chen as my bond partner, to share purpose and presence for the duration of our accord, or until the end of our cycles, whichever comes first. I offer him the protection of my house, the honor of my lineage, and the commitment of my conscience. The arbiter turned toward Marcus. Marcus Chen of Earth, Colony Kepler 442b. You have accepted bond right with this Valorian. State your intention. Marcus inhaled deeply, the air thick with alien incense and energy. I accept Sarah Thalen as my bond partner. I offer her the truth of my experience, the respect of my actions, and the commitment of my conscience. In return, I ask only that she honor our bond with patience and understanding. As I learn what it means to live between 2 worlds, the Valorian elders approached silently, painting delicate symbols across Marcus's chest and arms. The touch tingled like static, threads of alien energy winding into his skin. Then they moved to Sarah Thalen, mirroring the ritual with practiced precision. The marking is complete, the first elder intoned. Now comes the naming. Let there be silence for the speaking of true names. The vast hall fell completely still. Not even the crystals pulsed. Sarah Thalen stepped closer until she stood less than a foot away. She raised her hands, gently cupping Marcus's face. Her skin was cool, not cold, just unfamiliar. When she spoke his name in the old tongue, it wasn't merely sound when it was vibration. Maharakusanbal. The syllables rippled through him like a tidal current. Marcus gasped as a door seemed to open inside his mind, and suddenly he felt her. Not through touch, but through consciousness itself. Grief, determination, hope, fear. Her emotions flickered at the edges of his awareness like phantom lights. Then it was his turn. Marcus lifted his hands to her face, his heart pounding. He opened his mouth and spoke. Marcus spoke her name exactly as Calvin had taught him. Sir Thalen Valerian Enketh. The response was instant, like the universe itself inhaling. The bond snapped into place with a physical jolt almost audible. A surge that traveled from his spine to the base of his skull. Sarah Thalen's eyes widened slightly. Through the bond he felt her surprise. And her awe. It was stronger than anyone had anticipated, far stronger. "It is done," the Council Arbiter proclaimed. "Let the bond be recorded in the collective archives." The hall erupted into harmonic song, hundreds of alien voices weaving together in a complex resonance that vibrated the air. But beneath that chorus of celebration, Marcus sensed something from Sarah Thalen she would never show outwardly. Terror. Not fear of him, but of what they had just created. And in the galleries above, the Valorian elders who had watched in silence now exchanged knowing glances, faint smiles spreading across their faces. It was the look of people who had seen their plan fall perfectly into place. A plan neither Marcus nor Sarah Thalen had been told about. The integration tour began the very next day. 7 days, 7 worlds, 7 performances of unity for the entire galaxy to witness. Marcus and Sarah Thalen appeared before councils. Cameras and millions of onlookers, paraded as living proof that cross-species bonding could bridge civilizations. But everywhere they went, Marcus noticed the same thing. Certain factions watching from the shadows. Observing. Waiting. That same silent anticipation he'd first seen in the Valorian galleries. By the 4th day, aboard the diplomatic vessel Astral Concord, Marcus couldn't ignore it anymore. He found Sarah Thalen on the observation deck, standing before the viewport, her face lit by the swirling blue of a nearby nebula. "You're hiding something from me," he said quietly. "I can feel it through the bond. You know something connected to our arrangement, and you're afraid of what happens when I find out." Sarah Thalen didn't turn, but the glowing patterns across her skin darkened, shifting like storm clouds. Through the bond he felt her inner turmoil, hesitation, guilt, fear. Finally she spoke. "You're right," she said softly, "and you deserve to know the truth. But once I tell you, everything changes." She motioned for him to follow. They walked through the vessel's quiet corridors until they reached a sealed chamber used for private diplomatic briefings. When the doors closed behind them, she activated a holographic display. Complex genetic sequences and ancient star charts filled the air between them. 300 cycles ago, she began, the Valorians discovered something about cross-species bonds, something we've kept hidden from the collective. She zoomed in on a cluster of DNA strands rotating slowly in the air. We learned that under specific conditions, vast age differences, profound emotional trauma, true consent, and certain genetic compatibilities, these bonds can evolve beyond emotional connection. Marcus frowned. "Evolve how?" Sarah Thalen hesitated, her voice dropping to a near whisper. "They can trigger dormant genetic sequences, markers that shouldn't exist in separate species, sequences that suggest we're not as different as we appear, that maybe all sentient life in this region of space shares a common ancestor." Marcus felt his pulse accelerate. "That's impossible." Without a word, she pulled up another display and comparing genetic profiles of humans, Valorians, and other collective species. Across their DNA strands, certain regions glowed with identical code. "These sequences," she said quietly, "are not random. Either they were placed there intentionally, or," her voice faltered, "or our evolution was never entirely our own." "You mean these sequences were designed?" Marcus asked quietly. "Yes," Sarah Thalen replied. "Engineered, long ago, by an intelligence that existed before any of our civilizations. We call them the architects." Marcus stared at her, disbelief flickering behind his eyes. "And you think our bond is activating those ancient sequences?" "I don't just think it," she said. "I know it." Her gaze met his, unwavering. "I've been monitoring both our biological readings since the bonding ceremony. The data is undeniable. We're both changing, Marcus. The bond isn't just emotional. It's rewriting our DNA. In a few months, neither of us will be fully human or fully Valorian." She paused, her voice lowering. "We'll become something new." Marcus turned toward the viewport, watching the stars drift by like silent witnesses. "So that's why the Council supported this bond," he said slowly. "They weren't endorsing diplomacy. They were experimenting. They wanted to see if it would happen. Yes, Sarah Thalen admitted, bitterness shadowing her tone. I believed I was using political leverage to force interspecies unity. But in truth, they were using me, using us. The prophecy speaks of a bonded pair, whose merged genetics could unlock knowledge or abilities, powerful enough to reshape the collective itself. So they're waiting to see whether we become prophets, Marcus murmured, or weapons. She met his eyes again. Now that you understand, I have to ask, do you want to terminate the bond? It's still possible, though the process would be painful, politically disastrous, but it can be done. Marcus didn't answer immediately. Through the bond, Sarah Thalen could feel the storm of emotion inside him. Confusion, anger, compassion, and something else. A growing connection that neither of them had intended. If we terminate it now, he finally said, what happens to the changes already underway? They'll stabilize where they are, she replied. You'll live a normal human lifespan, maybe with minor enhancements. I'll return to being fully Valorian, but we'll both be diminished. Less than what we could become. And if we continue? Then in 6 months, Sarah Thalen said, the sequences will fully express, and together, we'll learn what the architects truly intended. Marcus turned back to her, his voice calm but certain. You once asked if I was wise or just profoundly foolish for accepting this bond. I think the truth is, both. A faint smile tugged at his lips. Maybe that's what love really is, the wisdom to know you're making a dangerous choice, and the courage to make it anyway. Sarah Thalen's patterns flickered, betraying surprise. Love? Marcus, we've known each other less than a lunar cycle. We're from different species. I'm 30 years your senior. And yet here we are, he said softly, rewriting our DNA together, bound by something neither of us can fully explain. If that's not the beginning of love, then what is? Through the bond, Marcus felt her resistance weaken, the walls she'd built since her first family's death slowly crumbling. And then, for the first time since their joining, Sarah Thalen reached out and took his hand. I didn't want to care about you, she whispered. I didn't want to risk that kind of pain again. But you're right. What we have now, it's beyond politics. It's real. Marcus tightened his grip. Then we continue. Whatever happens when whatever we become, we face it together. And we make sure no one else defines our purpose. You understand that could mean war, she warned. Then we face war if it comes, Marcus said firmly. But we'll face it as bond partners, as equals. As whatever we're evolving into, together. The next 3 months passed in a blur of transformation. Marcus began waking with memories that weren't his own. Visions of alien worlds, forgotten stars and ancient temples buried in nebulae. He dreamed in languages his translator chip couldn't decode. Sarah Thalen experienced the same. Their bond deepened beyond emotion, beyond thought. They began finishing each other's sentences, sensing pain or hunger before a word was spoken. Their movements grew synchronized, instinctive, as if guided by a shared consciousness awakening between them. Something new was being born, something the architects had left behind, waiting for this very moment. The synchronization between them deepened. The faint, glowing tracings that covered Sarah's bioluminescent skin began appearing across Marcus's body, delicate lines of light pulsing beneath his flesh. His face was still unmistakably human, yet there was something new in his eyes, something alien, ancient, aware. The council grew uneasy. Emergency meetings were called behind sealed doors. Whispers of containment protocols began circulating, but Sarah Thalen's political influence made her untouchable. And Marcus, being human, brought Earth's diplomatic corps into the equation, turning their bond into an interstellar incident no one wanted to ignite. It was Calvin who first noticed the change manifesting. Marcus had been assisting Sarah Thalen with routine diplomatic messages when, without realizing it, he began writing in a strange flowing script. No one recognized the language, yet everyone instinctively understood it. The symbols weren't human mathematics, nor were they Valorian geometries. They were something older, something deeper, equations that redefined space and time, making the collective's advanced gateway technology look almost primitive. Sarah Thalen stared at the glowing script in awe. This is it, she whispered. This is what the architects left behind. Knowledge of how to manipulate space-time itself, not just travel between stars, but between dimensions. Marcus turned his palm over, his skin faintly shimmering with alien light. But why us? Why awaken this now after thousands of years of silence? A voice answered from the doorway. Because there are things, returning to this region of space, things the architects wanted you to be ready for. An elderly Valorian woman entered the room, her patterns dimmed with age, her robes marked with the sigils of the Keeper caste. Ancient scholars entrusted with preserving the civilization's oldest records. Keeper Shalvain, Sarah Thalen said softly, bowing in respect. When the dormant sequences begin to express in a bonded pair, the Keeper explained, her tone heavy with both reverence and fear, we are summoned automatically. We've been watching, waiting to see if the prophecy would finally come true. Marcus frowned. Everyone keeps mentioning this prophecy, but no one seems willing to explain it. The Keeper moved closer to the holographic display, her eyes reflecting the floating equations. The architects hid two kinds of knowledge within the dormant genetic sequences, she said. One path leads to transcendence, evolution beyond physical existence, into a higher state of being. The other leads to salvation and the power to protect and preserve life across all species. When the darkness returns, Sarah Thalen's voice sharpened. What darkness? The Keeper looked up, her patterns shifting to a somber gray. The same darkness that forced the architects to abandon their bodies and ascend beyond this dimension. The same horror that devours civilizations and feeds on the minds of the living. We call them the harvesters. A chill ran through Marcus as she continued. They come in cycles every 50,000 years, consuming every sentient race that dares grow too advanced. The architects saw them coming too late to fight, but just in time to leave behind the tools their descendants would need to stand against them. Marcus felt the color drain from his face. You're telling me there are entities out there, creatures that devour entire civilizations, and they're coming back? Not coming, Keeper Shalvain corrected softly. They're already here. The words hung heavy in the air. Their advanced scouts entered this sector nearly 2 cycles ago. The Council has kept it quiet to prevent widespread panic, but the Keepers know. We've seen the signs. Whole colonies vanishing without a trace. Entire worlds falling silent. Sarah Thalen's tone was icy calm. And the main swarm? Based on current projections, the Keeper replied. 3 to 5 years, no more. That's why your activation is no coincidence. The architects timed this perfectly. You two are not merely a bonded pair. You are potential weapons or saviors, and the universe is about to find out which. Marcus exchanged a glance with Sarah Thalen. What do we have to do? Complete the transformation, Keeper Shalvain said simply. Allow the dormant sequences to fully express themselves and pray that the bond you've built, the love you found, is strong enough to keep you anchored in this reality. Because once the process finishes, transcendence will call to you. It's what tempted the architects to leave the physical realm entirely. But if you ascend, you abandon us, and the harvesters will consume what remains. With that grim warning, she left them alone in the quiet study, surrounded by equations, describing physics no mortal mind should understand. For a long time, neither spoke. We could refuse, Sarah Thalen murmured at last, her voice trembling between defiance and despair. Let the harvesters devour everything we've ever known. Marcus shook his head. No, we finish this. We become what the architects meant us to become, and we stay. We fight. Sarah Thalen turned toward him, eyes shimmering with shifting color. That's remarkably noble, coming from someone who started this journey trying to save just one small colony. That colony holds my sister, Marcus said quietly. And your people still mourn the children you lost. If we have the power to protect them, then using it isn't heroism, it's duty. Through their psychic bond, Sarah Thalen felt his conviction like fire, pure and unyielding. Then we see it through, she said softly. Whatever happens, whatever we become, we face it together. At that exact moment, something within them shifted. Their shared resolve triggered the next wave of transformation. Knowledge poured into their minds like liquid light. Physics, weapon schematics, dimensional field strategies, combat patterns designed to fight beings that devour worlds. They were no longer just human or Valorian. They were something new, something the architects had crafted long ago for a war no one remembered. 6 months later, that war began. The Harvesters' advanced scouts struck 3 major colonies at once, their arrival blotting out the stars. Marcus and Sarah Thalen, their transformation nearly complete. responded with powers that defied comprehension. They folded space-time itself, creating barriers of light and gravity that halted the invaders mid-strike. But they were not alone. 17 other bonded pairs, couples who had heard their story and chosen to awaken their own dormant sequences, joined them. Together they formed the first unified defense across the collective. Human, Valorian, and every hybrid in between, standing as one, they became the galaxy's final shield against extinction. The war was merciless. Marcus watched in horror as his sister's world Kepler 442b came under siege. Through the bond, he could feel Sarah Thalen's terror mirroring his own as they tore through folded dimensions to reach the colony in time. For 48 relentless hours they fought. Energy storms raged across the skies, entire fleets vanished into collapsed space, and reality itself trembled under the strain of their powers. When it was over, Kepler 442b still stood, but Marcus and Sarah Thalen were no longer the same. Something fundamental had changed within them. They couldn't fully return to a single physical form anymore. Their existence had stretched, anchored in multiple dimensions at once, part flesh, part light, part consciousness. The turning point came when Sarah Thalen made contact with the Harvester collective mind. Through the dimensional veil, she reached out, not with force but with empathy. "They're not predators," she told the council, her body flickering between solid and luminous states. "They're refugees, survivors of a catastrophe older than even the architects. They consume civilizations because it's the only way they've learned to live." The ancient knowledge embedded in Marcus and Sarah Thalen's DNA revealed something extraordinary. Another way. The Harvesters could feed on consciousness energy without annihilating sentient life. But it demanded sacrifice. The bonded pairs would need to maintain constant dimensional barriers, becoming living conduits between real space and the void, channeling energy safely. They would have to give up their humanity, their mortality, their freedom. Marcus didn't hesitate. "We'll do it." Through their link, he felt Sarah Thalen's agreement before she even spoke. "All of us," she said, "but the Harvesters must promise to draw only what naturally leaks through the fabric of existence, never again through extinction." The negotiations spanned months, maybe years. Time had begun to blur. But at last the Harvesters agreed. They were not monsters, only desperate beings starving for survival. Given an alternative, they chose peace. The war ended, not with victory but with understanding. And so the bonded pairs took their places at the edge of dimensions, becoming something between mortal and eternal. Living barriers, living guardians. 10 years after their original bonding ceremony, Marcus and Sarah Thalen stood, or rather manifested, on a platform orbiting Earth. Below them stretched the blue planet, finally safe. They had returned for a memorial dedicated to those lost in the Harvester attacks. Sarah Thalen's voice, soft but resonant, reached him through both sound and thought. "Do you ever regret it?" Marcus smiled faintly. "Not for a second. We saved trillions. We forged peace that might last for millennia. We proved that love can bridge the impossible." She gave a wry laugh. "We also bound ourselves to an eternity of service with no way out." "We have each other," Marcus said gently, turning to her. "And we have purpose." How many beings in the universe can say that? Behind them, representatives from every major species gathered, humans, Valorians, and countless others. Among them stood the next generation of bonded pairs, inspired by their example. Sarah Thalen glanced toward the horizon where space shimmered like liquid light. "Do you think the architects foresaw this? That we would choose service over transcendence?" Marcus's expression softened. "I think they left it open. They gave us the tools, not the answers. We decided what to build, and we built something even they couldn't." He looked at her, their bioluminescent patterns glowing in perfect synchrony. "Love. A love strong enough to keep us anchored when escape was offered." She smiled. "A love born from duty, politics, and 30 years between us. Who could have predicted that?" As the dedication ceremony began, Marcus and Sarah Thalen stood hand in hand, light flowing across their joined skin. Time lost meaning. Years blurred into decades, decades into centuries. The bonded pairs who maintained the dimensional barriers became legend, the guardians. From their post at the edge of reality, Marcus and Sarah Thalen watched civilizations rise, fall, and rebuild. They saw Marcus's sister live a long, full life surrounded by her. Children and grandchildren on Kepler 442b, they saw the Valorian people evolve, blending human insight with their ancient bioluminescent wisdom. And through it all, Marcus and Sarah Thalen remained, eternal witnesses to the universe they had saved, bound forever by love, duty, and light. The lessons of Marcus Chen and Sarah Thalen became woven into history itself. The story of their bond, born from necessity, tested by war, and transformed into eternal love, became the foundation of a new age. Across the collective, cultures evolved. The principles of cross-species unity were no longer theories or treaties. They were living truths. Humanity had spread among the stars, joining countless civilizations in peace. And through it all, Marcus and Sarah Thalen remained connected, not just by the bond, or the genetic transformation that had remade them, or the sacred duty they carried, but by a love that refused to fade. On Earth in Monument Plaza, under the pale light of 2 moons, a gathering of children from a dozen species sat before an ancient keeper. Her azure skin shimmered faintly, the patterns of her lineage glowing like starlight. She was one of the descendants of the original bonded pairs. A living bridge to the past. Did they really love each other? A small human child asked, eyes wide with wonder. The keeper smiled softly. They did, she said. Not at first. When politics forced them together, when age, biology, and culture stood like walls between them. No, it wasn't love then. But love doesn't always begin perfectly. Sometimes it's a choice 2 souls make. To stay connected, despite every reason not to. The child looked up at the stars. Are they still out there? Protecting us? The keeper's eyes glowed brighter as she raised her hand toward the night sky. Always, she whispered. High above, stars glittered. In the spaces between dimensions, each light a fragment of the vast energy network that held the harvesters at bay. Marcus and Sarah Thalen are still there, the keeper continued, along with all who followed their path, watching, guarding, loving, reminding us that the greatest force in the universe isn't power, or technology, or even the knowledge left by the architects. The children leaned forward. Then what is it? One whispered. Love, the keeper said, her voice trembling with reverence. Love that crosses boundaries. Love that chooses service over escape. Love that says, I will stand with you, even when the universe gives me every reason to walk away. Silence followed. The children looked skyward, where the constellations shimmered like living memories, and somewhere beyond those stars in the quantum fabric between dimensions, Marcus and Sarah Thalen felt the presence of the gathering. They're telling our story again. Sarah Thalen's voice resonated. Through the shared consciousness they had long become. Let them, Marcus replied, his tone filled with quiet pride. If it helps them believe that love can exist anywhere, between anyone, then our sacrifice means more than we ever imagined. Do you ever miss it? She asked softly. Walking on real ground, feeling the wind, sometimes, he admitted. But then I remember what we have now. We feel the heartbeat of galaxies. We hear the songs of newborn stars. We experience the entire universe at once. We became what the architects dreamed of but couldn't be. Sarah Thalen's essence glowed beside his. Yes, she said. They transcended out of fear. We stayed out of love. We've become something new, not human, not Valorian, something us. And in that truth lay the meaning of everything they had endured. From that first moment in the council chamber, when she had offered the bond, and he had accepted, they had set in motion a chain of events that forever changed creation. Not merely a political union, not just a scientific anomaly, not even the unlocking of ancient genetic secrets, but the birth of something infinitely greater, a love that defied every law of biology, every border of culture, every measure of time, a love that strengthened instead of fading, a love that chose responsibility over escape, service over transcendence, connection over isolation. In a universe once fractured by arrogance and division, their union had proven a simple truth. Sometimes a single act of vulnerable commitment can shift the fate of stars. Sometimes what begins as duty becomes destiny. Sometimes the most unlikely love stories are the ones that save the world. Marcus Chen and Sarah Thalen had proven all of that and more. And in the luminous silence between dimensions, they remained, 2 souls intertwined, eternal witnesses to creation, protectors of all life. They would continue their vigil for as long as consciousness endured. for as long as love itself existed in the universe, which they had discovered meant forever.